Reggae Interviews. Word sound power.
This is Reggae Interviews, and we are really blessed to hold a reasoning with Uncle Max at his home in St. Catherine in Jamaica. His musical journey began over 5 decades ago. Fans of his message music are to be found in every corner of the globe, young people right through to the elders. His music has a timeless quality, deeply rooted in the teachings of His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie I. I want to send a warm welcome to Uncle Max from the Reggae Interviews team.
Yeah, man. Thanks, man. It's always my pleasure to sit in with you guys and from the media to let the world know what's up, you know. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Well, we have to give a big thanks to yourself for spending some time with us today, and also to your management for making the connection possible today, which we're truly grateful for.
Yeah, Xana, she's doing a good job. You know, since she took over management of my affairs, I'm doing quite well, you know. Yeah, you know, she go through the universities, get her bachelor in entertainment, and so she kind of on top of things, what's happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The first thing I have to say is you're looking really well and healthy.
Thank you. I'm feeling well and healthy too.
Yeah. What are the keys for you to stay in good health and shape? What are the things that you do on a day-to-day basis to maintain that health?
Well, I would say in my pursuit of peace of mind, I finally find it with the family I have, the support I get. And, you know, I'm not going to tell you that I'm a vegan or going through no diet thing, you know. But what I'm saying, I stay away from the fast lane. Fast lane mean cocaine, heroin, uppers, downers, and there's a new one called Mali and things like that. I stay away. I've been away from that thing from ever since. So maybe that's what keep me going, eh? I just smoke weed night and day. It's my medicine.
And I think one thing that I've realised is that being here in Jamaica for the past week or two, life in the city can get very, very hectic, whereas you're in a rural part of Jamaica, the breeze is blowing and the air seems much fresher and cleaner. Yeah,
I choose this little spot. This little spot was given to me by Jah himself, because I was living in Greenwich Town. You know that's what they would call the lower class community. Beautiful people, you know. I hate was to leave, but I had was to, because the kids, you know, I didn't want to grow my kids there. So God gave me this little piece of paradise, and, you know, I bought the land, built my house, and I'm quite comfortable. There's all trees around me, and my cows over there, you know, so I'm quite happy.
Yeah. It seems like you do quite a lot of farming here.
Yeah, I try, you know, I follow what Marcus Garvey said. You know, you have to have food, and, you know, it's all, from here go all the way back down, it's all different type of food and fruits and what have you, you know, and that's what it is. It keep me up, keep me going, you know.
Yeah. Now, as one of the elders in the music, you've been a role model for younger generations of singers and players of instruments for years. Who are the people that really inspired you during your formative years?
Locally, I would have to say Derek Morgan first. I was actually an ardent fan of Derek Morgan. I used to listen to everything he does. Still alive, still going. Yeah, and you have people like Ken Booth, you know, Eric Monty Morris, and, you know, the list goes on. You know, I was actually following these guys, seeing what they do, what direction they take, so I can decide what direction I want to take. And I started out doing what they call Saucy songs. It's not lewd, it's saucy. Well, in the 70s, I think it was 1971, I changed. It just, I think it's about 2 to 3 years I did portraying that image. And then I kind of come to the realization that it don't sound like something coming from a role model for a family.
Right, okay.
So I quit and start doing cultural music. I sing about daily happenings, sing about Rastafari, which is my faith. And from 1972 until now, I'm at it. I don't let nothing sway me from roots and culture. All the fads that they carry around, I stick to my roots and culture. Because fad is a fad. You just need an E for it to fade. Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, when I listen back to some of the vintage music from the history of Jamaican music, the music back then was very different. We had a lot of influences from the American R&B, which I know people like Coxsone brought in. We had the close-knit harmonies. Today, though, it seems like there's a melting pot of music. The influences seem to be coming from wide and far away. What are your thoughts on the direction that the music is presently in 2023?
I think the world have tried everything so far. I mean, everything. And they don't find solace in a lot of them things. What they find in reggae, they don't find in anything else, because reggae is basically a message music. It's an awareness music. And sometimes people, it's not all the time people want to dance. Sometimes they want to be inspired, so they sit and listen. And that's where most of my music comes in. That's the crowd I cater for. The person that is trying to figure out what life is about and to realize what's happening around them. My music is here to show you. Yeah.
Now this year, 2023, marks a really important milestone, because it was 55 years ago that you recorded that Saucy song that became your first major hit single. It even got banned by the BBC, and for some reason the skinheads in the UK really took to that song.
Yeah, the Skinheads was the people who actually promoted that it hit the charts, and it went in the chart and it stays in for 26 weeks because of the Skinheads they couldn't take it out. That was their anthem. You know, I give thanks to them for that. And you know, 1969 was really a musical year. I met some tough guys out there, from Fleetwood Mac, go all the way down, you know. I met them out there, work among them out there.
Yes.
You know, I had was to show my worth. You know, it's just that I was portraying the wrong message at the time. You know, but it was still accepted. Yeah, it took me through some very great, exciting segments, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that song, it actually went into the top 10 in the British national charts in August 1969. Over 250,000 copies of that record were sold. Is that still a song that you still perform to this day?
If it's requested. Normally, anywhere in Europe, I play and somebody come and request it. I don't have to ask no questions. That's a skinhead. You know, and I always try to please them, because they are the guys who actually, you know, I can say, they stand up behind me in 1969. They are part of the machinery that formed Max Romeo. So regardless of what they're saying about them, Nazi this and revolutionary that, I see them as some jovial youths who is defying a very, what you would call, oppressive system. That's what it was. So when I come along with a song like that, banned from the BBC, but each time they have to show it on Top of the Pops, they would just show my face. This song is from this artist, and they move on.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it's the Skinheads. Wherever I play and, you know, sound's playing and they go to the sound and they do a wet dream, you know they're going to wreck the thing. You know, they will wear some steel Dr. Martin boot, man.
Yeah.
They'll kick that amplifier to bits if you can't play a wet dream. So that was really the revolutionary thing within them at the time. Yeah.
And it was around that time, around about 1969, when you went on your very first tour as an artist, as Max Romeo. Share some memories and thoughts on that very first tour.
Wow, there's a lot of memories, man. First to begin, it's not everywhere I could sing Wet Dream, and there are places that I'm forbidden to sing it, that the audience, members of the audience, remember, you know, I'm a little guy, I don't weigh much, they would come and lift me and put me back on the stage.
Wow.
And say, we pay to hear Wet Dream, don't tell me no shit, you're going to sing it. It happened to me in Wolverhampton, when this guy, Enoch Powell, was there. It was forbidden for me to do it in the town hall. If I didn't do it, it would be chaos. So I had to. It happened to me in, not Queen Elizabeth Hall, Royal Albert Hall. Yeah, the Queen Kids was in the box, so I wasn't allowed to perform it. I was forced to. I was taken back on stage by some powerful guys, and then the crowd started chanting, "We want Wet Dream." I hear from the box, We want wet dreams. So I was to perform the damn song, you know, and beat a hasty retreat out of that place, you know.
So you did get to perform that for the Queen's children then?
That's right. You know, I can't say who was there, but I know there were kids in the box. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As a youth leaving the island of Jamaica, what sort of feelings did that sort of bring inside you? Because that was the first time that you were getting onto an aeroplane and going into overseas territories.
I remember the date. I remember the airplane. It was the 20th of June 1969, and the airplane was PAA, Pan American Airways. You know, so it was a rags to riches situation in which I can't go into the details now, man. It was rough. I was just called from rags to go to England, and matter of fact, my father, I didn't have a good relationship with my father, and he was to sign the documents for me to get the visa, and he refused to. So Bunny Lee, as a old dog, in Jamaican style, he has a farm just for my father. He said, "What's your father's name?" I said, "Irvin Smith." He said, "Okay, bam, Irvin Smith," and signed upon it and put it in, bam, they stamped my visa, and I was off to England.
Wow.
I have to give thanks for Bunny for that.
Give thanks to Bunny Lee, rest in power, because I guess that had he not signed that form for you, you would never have done that first performance.
I wouldn't be Max Romeo. Maybe I would be dead by now, God forbid it. Yeah.
So, you set foot into England for the very first time, the summer of 1969. What were your first impressions? Because, you know, the demographics, the whole geography, the build-up of the UK is so different to Jamaica.
I know. But obviously it wasn't too hard for me because I dropped into a Jamaican community in Alsden. So I seen my people, and you know, Jamaica is basically, it's like a white man country. We see them every day. So I didn't have that culture shock. The only culture shock I had was, you know, differentiating stores from the roads to get there and things like that. Right. You know, everything was moving at a speed, so I had to play catch up, you know. But I stayed for 3 years. Then I realized England is a little too slow for me. So my next stop was New York. Holy shit, too fast. I was to run back to just my speed, which is Jamaica, you know. Yeah, so here I am. Since 1989, I get back home, and I don't spend much time here. I'm always traveling, you know. Actually live in a bloody suitcase, you know. But you know, this tour, at the end of this tour, I'm going to taper down a little, so I have more time to spend at home and do the things I like more, you know.
Well, speaking of suitcases, we know that you are getting ready to pack those touring bags for one last time on what has been announced as the Max Romeo, the farewell tour, which was announced on social media.
Yeah, it's not farewell to music. I want to make that plain because I'm getting a lot of curse from Africa and about Africa been saying, "Man, we've been waiting for you from you as a teenager. Now you're an old man and you still don't come. And you're telling us that you're leaving stage. What did the African do to you? Why we can't see you?" They're mad. So I have to tell them, look, I don't quit music. I just quit long-term tours like the one I'm about now. 50 shows, you know. I can do it. I'm strong enough and healthy enough. But at the end of this, I don't think I could do another 50, yeah? But I'm still working, you know. I take festivals here or, you know, things like that. I'll be still around, but it's just the long term. I say farewell to the long term, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is that there will still be more opportunities for your fans worldwide to maybe see you on a show, but it will be just one-off special shows and things like that.
That's it. You said it the right way. That's it. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay. And the music, of course, we know is still going to continue because that's part of your DNA.
I don't stop recording, man. I do an album every year. You know, it's like a habit to me. I always keep writing because, you know, I do covers, but it's not my main thing. I like to write a song and sing it. That's where I tick, you know.
Yes.
So I keep writing. Right now I just finished an album, and I had one before that's not even released openly yet. It's just on the internet, World of Ghouls.
Yes.
You know, and this one now, the Romeo Effect, is still being put together for release in April. You know, so that's going to be exciting one because it's retro. It's old songs I redo, and have other artists coordination, combination in it as well. So it's very exciting. I don't hear it's not complete yet, so I can't say anything about it as yet, further than that,
But this is a commemorative album called The Romeo Effect, which is going to be Max Romeo and family and friends, because I know that Xana and Azizi will definitely be featured on that album as well.
Yeah, that's right, and other friends, there are a couple of friends of mine is slotted for it. I don't finish talk to them yet, but they are slotted for it. Yeah, that's all right.
So, a question to you, Uncle Max. Why now? Why does it seem like now is the right time to end the long touring schedule?
Look, the world is in a serious stage right now. Between China, Russia, and America, anything can happen. It's three big dogs. There's a lot of little puppies around them, like NATO people and, other people. And somebody's going to step out of line and do the wrong thing. And here comes the Armageddon. I don't want to get caught out there with it, so I'm just going to go through. Now, China said they're not going to fight America till 2025, so I have 23 and 24 to hustle, So that's it. Yeah, man.
And I suppose that not having to go on these long tours, which I know probably are probably quite tiring in terms of having to deal with things like back-to-back dates, potential flight delays, the nutrition. It all kind of comes into play when you're doing a long tour, I guess.
You have to make your plan for food, because you're not going to see much kitchens. So you have to carry food supplements like amino pep and all these things, omega-3. I always travel with these things, to help boost the thing up, to keep me up,
Yeah.
So you have to prepare. Because when you're out there, it's basically fast food, and I'm not too much for fast food, but I make do. When I have to. I'm not going to die because of pride, yeah? That's the way it is,
And I guess that these are the factors that are probably the hardest or challenging parts of being on the road, not being able to get things that you probably have in abundance on a day-to-day basis back home, but then in some parts of the world it's not so easy, for example, perhaps to get things like vegan food and things like that, so you've got to kind of adjust yourself to the current sort of the area that you're in.
That's right. You have to adjust to the situation. You can't go overboard with it, but you can have a sandwich out of tuna, you can have some vegetables, and things like that. There are alternatives. You don't have to smash your head out there, actually. There's alternative, I've been doing it for over 50 years. I know, I can tell you. And I'm not dead yet, and I'm 78 years old, and I don't feel it. So I must be doing something right. So whatever I'm doing, I'm not going to stop.
No. No. Now, this farewell tour almost had an introduction quite recently at the 78th Earth Day celebrations for Robert Nesta Marley at Emancipation Park, where you came on and you blessed the crowd with a few of your favourites. What were the feelings or emotions on that day for you?
Wow, it was very emotional, because I haven't done Jamaica in maybe 15 years or something like that, because thing is, I boycott Jamaican music because dancehall music, you still don't accept it. I'm not going to knock it or fight anyone, but I still don't accept it. Me personally don't accept the direction that music takes. And in my opinion, it totally demolished the music industry in Jamaica. It doesn't have a market internationally, and just keep beating it in the ears of people. The other day I parked in front of a bar, and I had was to move fast, the type of nastiness that is being portrayed. And the woman, the modern day woman now, I would say, has lost the sense of pride, because they're supporting the nastiness what the men are doing. In my boy days, in my 16, 17, I do most of my growing up in the street. But women had pride. They're not going to walk in the street with a skirt so short that you're seeing the seat of the panties. So it's a lot of things. It's a lot of things that demolish the industry. So I keep myself, look, I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to play the perfect guy here. Yeah? It's just my observation and my thought. And I know there are many people who think that way as well. So it don't make sense. I wonder who the hell Max Romeo think him is attack against dancehall. I'm not talking about the music, you know. I'm talking about the content of the music. Because if you ask me, it's African beat. It's not reggae. It's more African beat, which is acceptable now across the globe. So if they can use the same beat and do something, you know, something positive. More uplifting, you know. Tell the people what's happening. You're living on a time bomb, waiting to explode. You know, all these songs, these are Max Romeo songs. I'm telling messages to the people. I'm not going to tell you how I cock up this and do that to a girl and ray. To me, it's unpleasant. And they're going to say, oh, you're a hypocrite because you started the whole trend. No, I didn't start that trend. All right. I want to play with your pussy. I mean your pussy cat. Yeah? It's not just the pussy. A cat named Pussy Cat. So you put the cat to it. So if a young kid listening to it, they just play with the parents' little cat around the house. These guys nowadays, they're so bloody explicit, they're sick your stomach, man.
I think the difference is that I think that in the past, I mean, dancehall music has always had that edge to it, and I think that in the past the lyrics may be suggestive, whereas now it's outright vulgar.
Vulgar and violent. You know why? It's the devil's music. I might be shot for saying this, but I'll take the bullet. It's the devil's music. They get rid of the peace and love. I passed a group of young boys on the road one time, and you know, I'd stop at a stoplight. There was here conversation. Said, love my brethren, peace and love my brethren. The man him turn on me said, look, me no love man, go sack your mother. And I'm just telling him peace and love because that's what me, Bob Marley, Jacob Miller, all these great guys from the beginning had the people singing, one love, let's get together and feel our. Everybody love the one love thing. Even the little youth, them when they see elders like me, they clasp their hands and respect elder. Now they'll shoot an elder, you don't have to wink for an elder get shot. So the whole thing is demoralized. We don't have an industry no more. And you know, I'm not going to feel bad for saying it because if you do your research, you realize the fact. I'm not fighting down dancehall music because I'm glad to see my local ghetto youth, them eat our food. But I'm trying to tell them, change the message. Change the message. The beat is all right, the melody is all right, but change the message. And let's see if we can get on the international market, or else it's total destruction for reggae music across the globe. Yeah.
Going back to the tour, your music's always had a really special connection in a lot of parts of the world, but in particular Europe, South America and Japan. Why do you think that the people in these very different regions or continents have really been attracted to the works of Max Romeo and other roots artists?
I think there's a song I sing named Put on an Iron Shirt and Chase the Devil Out of Earth. Everybody understands what the devil is, a negative thing that controls the heart of leaders. And everybody is on, that song is on the lips of every human that hears it. And that's what established, the Europeans listen to it first. Matter of fact, the French people start listening to me first, and it's true, them putting me where I was at the time, that it flowed over to the other European countries, and everybody get to know me and love me. You know, I love the whole of them. You know, I don't just say France or Europe. Yes. I do have nothing with Europe. Yeah.
Well, look, your tour, I think at the latest count, I think there are more than 50 dates, including performances planned in Israel, Greece, Germany, the Netherlands, France, Italy, the UK. Your children, Xana and Azizi, they're going to be joining you on these performances as well, because it's the Romeo Effect.
That's right. The only one in my mind that is questionable right now is Israel, because I don't understand what's happening with them and Palestinians and the Iranians, you know. So I don't really want to go over there and rain a bullet on me. It's not my war, you know, I'm just bringing blessings. So that one is very iffy. But all the other rest, you know, I'll be around, you know. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm not going to Israel, I'm just saying it's iffy, because if the disturbance start and bombs and missiles start throwing around the place, I mean, I wouldn't have an audience anyway.
Yeah.
So that's iffy.
Yes. in a way, it almost feels to me like there's almost like a passing of the baton to Zano and Azizi in planning this farewell tour, because obviously they're still making music, they're still, you know, in their younger generations, and they've still got so much more to offer.
That's right. They're going to start fronting their own thing beginning next year. Matter of fact, Xana do it already. The last tour we had, she did 2-1, I think it was 3-1 hour performance, which was very accepted by the audience. Now, Azizi, he's just with me most of the time, so he's going to have his say this year to do his own 1 hour. You start him off with 1 hour. Yes. Then they can go hour and a half, you know. Not 10 minutes like Jamaica, you don't, you know. Yeah, you can't do less than an hour.
No.
So they actually, both of them have the 1 hour package ready. And the other brother now, Rolly, he's into rap and things like that. Just a different type of music. Sounds very good. But he's going to emerge next year as well. Yeah, because I tour him, but only in Brazil.
Right, okay.
I don't take him to Europe yet.
Okay.
But he's no stranger to Europe, because him and Azizi was out there as Rominal in times gone by, you know, and they create an impact, really. So they just decide to go separate.
Right, okay.
And they're still at it, you know.
There must be this sense of satisfaction within you to see that your children are, you know, pursuing the same sort of career pathway as what you did all those years ago, and, you know, the chance to perform with them together on the stage. That must bring a joy within you.
Yeah, it does, and you know, that's what I had to do, because all I know is music. You know, apart from, I can tell you a few pointers about cows, since I'm doing that business about 15, 20 years now.
Okay.
But all I have is music, and that's all I had to give them. I keep telling them from them in school, I said, look, if you know you're not going to be a preacher, a lawyer, a doctor, or what have you, tell me. So they said, Daddy, it's music, you know. It's music we deal with. So I said, okay, I've spent a couple of $1 million and built a studio and give them, equipped with everything, instruments, amplifiers, what have you. I said, this is it, music. And they're doing a good job. Yeah, they're doing a good job,
yeah. Some of your most popular recordings were recorded at the iconic Black Ark Studios with Lee Scratch Perry. Lee Scratch Perry, he's quoted as being a musical genius. Did it feel like that for you at the time when you were working with him?
That's a true description of Lee Scratch Perry. He's a capital letter genius. You know, I've spent weeks in studio with Lee Scratch and I watch him operate. The guy made music out of stones. You know, when you listen to his rhythm, you hear little things that you have to ask, what that? Wait, hold on, what that? You can't say what that, because he plays around with every little thing. Before a session, we'll be walking around the yard with a spoon, and you take up a stone and you touch it, ping, ping, throw that away, stand, ping, ping, throw that away, and find one, ping. Anytime you hear him lick 1, 2, or 3 times, that's the one I'm looking for. He was a genius. I love working with Lee Perry, because you have to do the right thing. It's no joke thing when you're working with him. He's into the thing, like, you know, he's a part of it. He's in the control room, you know, you're in the voice room, but he's like a part of it, because dancing so much. You have some weird little dance when he's actually doing sessions. Yeah, he was a very nice brethren, man. Yeah.
And I think around that time when you did quite a lot of your recordings, we also had people like Junior Mervin. I think the Heptones were there as well around the same time as well.
Yeah, there was quite a few. The Congos, quite a few artists was passing through at the time. It was fire in that studio, man. No wonder it burned down, because literally, because it was pure fire, man. Yeah, you know, Scratch don't work with any artist, you know. You have to select the artists that you work with. You know, you don't like the back talk. You don't like the back talk thing. When him sees something, he know that he understands the marketing, he know what they want to hear out there. And I just telling you, look, if I'm going to put my name to this thing, it have to be right. So take that line out of it. Find another line, I'll let me give you one. Here, put that in it. That's the way he is.
That's the way he was.
Yeah.
One question that's always sort of like gone through my mind is that as a solo artist, you never did any recordings down at Coxsone Dodd Studio 1. No. Was there a reason for that?
Well, I hear so much horror story about Coxsone robbing artists, and you know, I've seen Coxsone artists around town not looking like what I thought the artists that have 1, 2, 3 number one songs should look like. But then again, I come on later and go through the same thing, so it's actually a ritual in the thing, you know. But another turn off is his studio was where a Vice Wet Dream. Bunny rent the studio. The rhythm was done at Treasure Isle, Duke Reed. Derek Morgan first voiced it with a song called Holy Jack. All right, he decided to voice me at Studio One. Coxsone was the engineer. When I start singing, every night me go to sleep, me have wet dream, whoop, tape stop. What happened? Bunny Lee, where you get them fool artists? I sing them dirty tune. Me no record them thing then in my studio. So Striker said, me said that. Me rent the studio, can't tell me where to record. Where the apprentice said, call the printer, because I know the printer can't do the work. That was Errol T from Joe Gibbs. He was a printer, and Errol come in and we do the song. All right, all them big songs go to England. None of them make it. Wet Dream make it to the British chart during the Beatles' reign. So you know, so there's no simple shit. Okay. From that day on, Coxsone idolized me. Anywhere him see me and him reason. Before he died, he said, he called me one day, I went up there, carry a guy to get some vintage record. He said to me, Max Romeo, how long you singing now? I said, about 40 odd years or so. He said, yeah, and you do have one song on Studio One, you're going to let the legend die without you? I said, all right, boss, I'm up on the road now, anytime I cycle, I will come grace you with 2 or 3 on the whole rhythm. Then. All right. It never happened. When I decide, say, I'm going to try to think him dead, that means I wasn't supposed to.
Right. Okay.
So I guess I'm the only artist that reached where I reached in the business that hadn't done a record on Studio One. Yeah.
Because I think, you know, when we sort of look at a lot of the elders in the music, everybody has some form of connection, whether they were in a group at Studio One or whether they went to those Sunday auditions themselves. Studio One and Treasure Isle, I think, were very instrumental in the growth of many of the artists.
Yeah, they had the monopoly on radio plays and things like that, you know, so they had a little small producers like the one I started with, which was Kendall, Carlton label. You know, they get a break, but not as big as Studio One and them people. I mean, their music have to be good.
Yes.
In order for anything to happen, you know. Yeah, it's a tradition.
So, in closing, if you had to do it all again, would you do anything differently now, reflecting back on the past 55 years?
Yes, I would get my shit in order before I record the first song.
Okay. This is kind of like the business side of things that you're relating to.
That's right, yeah, show business. But I was just there with the show. I didn't know nothing about the business until later down in life. Then I realized that you have a place like Domain that owns your name. After you promote your name for 40, 50 years, you only realize you can't put up a Max Romeo construction company unless you pay the domain for the name.
Right.
These things wasn't told to us that we could get we shit together. They wait till they set up the thing and capture a lot of us names and things like that. Then another one called the Black Hole. They rob you for 50 years and they're supposed to pay you now. They can't go back further than 7 years. Yes. The rest of it goes in Black Hole. Who controls the Black Hole? Nothing goes in the Black Hole, come back out. You can't get nothing from the Black Hole, which is the majority of yours. I'm going through the same shit right now, the Universal and some other people. The most of my money went in the Black Hole because I didn't know the business in the beginning. And people who know the business exploit me. That's why most of my things end up in the Black Hole. Now I'm trying to dig it out, but the hole too damn deep.
And do you think that some of the younger generations, the people that have come after you, do you think that people are now learning the business side? Because it's all good and well having a great voice, a great talent, but I think combined with that, you need to have a good team around you. You need to know the business side. Do you see that the youths of today, they're actually sort of getting their things in order?
No. They're too hype to listen. You can't reach them, the majority of them. You can't reach them to say, look, I've been there and done that. This is it. First thing they're going to hit you. Sure, you're old boy, your day's done, man. You to do it now. Yeah, doing it, but you need advice from who do it already. The first thing you have to do, you have to make sure, say, you write your title or whatever and post it to Washington, or get somebody post it from Washington back to you, so you can have it put on. That means registration. That nobody do that. There's matter of fact, some of them can't do it because they only do covers. And those who write from the lips because they can't write physically. Most of us can't read, so we can't put nothing on paper. So you go right in front of the mic, and any little stupidness coming on your mind, you just blast it out. And it depends on who you are and what label you are. No matter how obnoxious it is, it becomes #1 for our 6 weeks. Yeah.
Well, look, Uncle Max, I really give thanks for you sharing some time with us today. I think that, the world is patiently awaiting the farewell tour that is going to be starting very, very soon. And we're also going to be looking forward to that 46th album, The Romeo Effect, as well. A closing message to our viewers today.
Yeah, we're living in perilous times, and we're heading, we're free flowing from the sky down to the earth. We don't get that thud yet, so brace yourself for the thud. Hope for the best. Hope for the best. That's what you got to do. Yeah.
We give thanks for your time today. Peace and blessings.
Blessings to you and everyone, man. It's my pleasure.
Reggae Interviews. Word Sound Power.